Hey everyone, my name is Dylan Adams, and for today's video, we're going to be talking about using the technique of vibrato while playing slide guitar. We're going to talk about what it is, how to do it, and most importantly, how and when not to do it, because in my opinion, it is one of the most overused and least thoughtfully performed techniques in all of slide guitar, and honestly, just guitar in general. So let's get into it. So chances are, if you are watching this video, then you already know what vibrato is. But just in case you don't, vibrato is essentially when you slightly vary the pitch of a note in a consistent and rhythmic way. And you'll know when a guitarist is doing it when you'll see them kind of wiggle their hand back and forth, or sometimes their whole arm. And when a slide guitarist does it, they're kind of moving the slide back and forth across the fret. And it's essentially just a technique to give more character and emotion to the notes that you're playing. Vibrato is a very personal thing, and it's one of the most defining characteristics of any guitarist because everyone does it a little bit differently. It's also one of the most difficult techniques for a guitarist to learn and master because it's pretty much entirely feel-based and can't really be taught. It's something that you have to develop gradually over time. It's not something you can just learn in one day. But I am going to give you guys some tips and pointers to use as kind of a jumping off point to start developing your vibrato on slide guitar. So the first thing we're going to talk about is hand positioning. And when we're playing slide guitar at all, whether we're worrying about vibrato or not, it is important to have a consistent and relaxed hand position. And the best position for that, in my opinion, is to essentially have your thumb planted flat on the back of the neck, your wrist straight, and your fingers in a relaxed, slightly curved position. You don't want to have your thumb hanging off the side like this because it's less stable. You don't want to have, like I said, your wrist bent and your fingers straight because it's just uncomfortable and not natural. You just want to have everything in a nice, natural, relaxed position. And this is very important for vibrato because you want to have a certain degree of stability and control, but you also want your wrist to be able to move freely and loosely. Before you start trying to add vibrato to any notes with the slide, make sure you can play notes in tune consistently with accurate intonation with the slide. And remember, in order to play notes in tune with the slide, you have to place it directly over the fret that you want to play. You can't put it in between frets like you normally do with your fingers when you're fretting. It has to be exactly over the fret to be in tune. So work on just playing a few notes cleanly with zero vibrato first. And once you feel confident in that, then you can start to work on vibrato. It's very difficult to put into words exactly how you need to be moving your hand and your wrist and your arm. I can tell you what not to do, though, is the motion is not this. You're not twisting the slide back and forth. You're not moving your entire arm back and forth. It's essentially this kind of motion right here. And I'll show my entire arm doing it. So you can see my entire arm is moving a little bit, but it's not this kind of thing. It's almost as if I have a sort of center of rotation somewhere around here on my wrist, and I'm kind of wiggling my hand and my wrist in a way where this part is almost staying stationary in a way, but my arm is almost rotating around this point where my thumb is right here. No part of your elbow, your wrist, your hand should be tight whatsoever. You have to keep everything loose and relaxed in order to do this in a smooth way. All right, so now that we've talked about the basics of how to just move your hand and wrist when you're doing vibrato, now we're going to get into what I like to think of as the two main variables of vibrato, and that is width of vibrato and speed of vibrato. Width is referring to how far you're moving the slide with each oscillation, and speed is exactly what it sounds like, just how quickly or slowly you're moving the slide back and forth. The combination of those two factors is essentially what defines a person's vibrato or gives it its kind of signature sound. For example, if you think of Duane Allman, I would consider his vibrato to be narrow and somewhat fast, so that looks like this. So he's not moving the slide very far back and forth. It's a kind of narrower sort of area that he's moving it, and he does it pretty fast. So it's going to sound like this. That's a pretty Duane Allman-like vibrato there. Whereas Warren Haynes has a wider and slower vibrato, meaning he's moving the slide further and it's kind of slower. So he might be like, or, and this can be an entire spectrum. You can have someone that has kind of a medium width and a medium speed. You can have someone that has a fast speed and a wide width. So something like that would sound like, which I tend to not like the sound of too much. Having a super wide and fast vibrato can sound just a little bit, just like a bit much, you know, just like a. Or you could have a narrow and slow vibrato, which would look like. And my own vibrato, personally, I would probably call it a medium width, so somewhere in between like Dwayne and Warren, and then a fairly fast speed. So if I'm just kind of doing my thing, not thinking about it, then I'm going to do a vibrato something like this. And once again, this is something that can't really be taught. It just sort of has to be felt, and it is kind of up to you how you want to approach doing your vibrato in terms of these two variables. And for a lot of people, it's not something they can control. That's just how they do it. But it's something that you absolutely want to be aware of while you're in the process of developing your vibrato. Once you have enough of a handle on controlling your vibrato, then you can start to utilize different speeds and widths depending on what kind of effect you want, what kind of a sound you want. So if it's a sort of quieter, more intimate moment, then you might want to use, say, a narrower and slower vibrato. So if you're going like, but if it's a louder, more intense part of a song, then you might want to speed up and widen that vibrato. So and so this brings me to the sort of partial inspiration for this YouTube video, which was a comment that a user left on one of my other videos. And I'm not going to put him on blast and read his comment word for word, but according to him, the most important thing to be aware of when you're developing your vibrato on slide guitar is exactly where you're moving the slide in relation to the target fret or the target note. And he says it's extremely important not to go past the target fret or sharp of the target note that you want to play while doing vibrato, and that you absolutely have to only go down from the note and then up to that note or up to that exact fret. So essentially what he's saying is you have to do this when you're vibratoing. So say we want to play the high E string 7th fret right here. So he's saying you have to do this. And you cannot do this. And I just wanted to bring this up because that is a factor with vibrato on slide, and that's not an incorrect way to approach it. That is a valid way to approach it if you prefer to do that. But his claim that you have to do it this way, that it's the most important thing when you're first learning to do vibrato, I completely disagree with. In my opinion, you can either do what he's saying, where you only go behind the fret and stop at it, or you can sort of go equidistant to either side of the fret. And the reason why I don't think this matters that much is because either way, it's still the exact same motion that you're doing with your hand. It's either you're just doing it here or you're just doing it back a little bit further. There's not really any difference there in what you're actually doing with your hand. And honestly, it doesn't end up sounding that different. As long as you can do it consistently with either method, it's going to come out fine. And in my opinion, that is the most important thing, is regardless of your width of vibrato, your speed of vibrato, whether you're doing it behind the fret or around the fret, the most important thing is just consistency. Because a lot of times with beginners, you hear them, they'll kind of go, they can't pin down a specific speed or a specific width or a specific area to kind of target. They just kind of, and obviously that's an exaggeration, but the most important thing is to be able to do it nice and consistently and smoothly. And just so you know, for me personally, the factor of where in relation to the fret you move the slide, in my entire time of learning slide, I did not consider it once. That is not something I ever thought about. And personally, I do it on either side of the fret. And I think I probably have always done it that way, and it didn't really hinder my learning or anything like that. And it's not any easier or more difficult than only going up to the fret. If anything, it sounds more difficult to me to have to be that aware of exactly where you're placing the slide while you're doing vibrato. To me, as long as you're kind of just in the ballpark of that target fret, then you're going to be fine. And just in general, just try not to overthink it when it comes to that aspect. All right, so now that my little rant is out of the way, the last thing I want to talk about is when to use vibrato. You know, everyone's seen the classic slide players do the so-called 12th fret wiggle, and typically when people, you know, see slide guitar, they see a lot of this. They see a lot of vibrato. And so the inclination for beginners is to put vibrato on everything. And that can end up sounding kind of like this. Which is okay, but it doesn't have a lot of nuance, and it just sounds kind of shaky and unstable, and it's just a bit much. So in that sense, vibrato is probably the most overused technique when it comes to slide guitar. And the answer to that is use vibrato with purpose. One way you can do this is slide into a note and let it sit there for a second and then start vibratoing. You hear singers do this a lot. They'll sing a note and it's clear and straight, and then it starts to waver a little bit. So that sounds and looks like this. As opposed to just nice and easy. You can also just not do vibrato. That is perfectly fine. As long as your intonation is solid, then you can have a lick where at least one or two of the notes in there have no vibrato on them whatsoever. So that can sound something like this. So you notice on that first note, I just slid into it, and I kind of fell off it a little bit, but there was no vibrato in there. It was just... And in terms of just how to choose when to do vibrato or not, honestly, it just kind of comes with time and practice and listening to singers and listening to great slide players such as Derek Trucks. Derek is maybe one of the best at that. He is very intentional with which notes he chooses to put vibrato on and which notes he does not. But yeah, listening to singers is probably the ultimate way to kind of gain that sort of intuition in the moment as to when to add vibrato onto a note and when not to. Because at the end of the day, I've said this before, but at the end of the day, slide guitar is an attempt at emulating the human voice on the guitar. So what better way to learn how and when to use vibrato tastefully than to listen to great singers? It can be any genre, any singer, it really doesn't matter. A great singer is going to be a master at this, and emulating that on the slide guitar is the best way to be tasteful and thoughtful in your use of vibrato. All right, so that does it for today's video. I hope this was helpful for you. I feel like I didn't have a lot to actually show you guys technique-wise with this because, again, it's just something that almost can't really be taught. You just have to gradually work on it over time and develop it yourself. But I still hope that you're able to gain something from this. And, you know, once you have a grasp of the technique and can get a consistent sound with your vibrato, it really is all about being tasteful and being vocal and not overdoing it and choosing when to use your vibrato. And if you want to dig deeper into this stuff more with me, then you're in luck because I now offer private lessons, and I just opened up my time slots for November of 2023. So feel free to go to the link in the description of this video and sign up for a private lesson with me. It'll be over Zoom, and we can work on whatever you want, whether it pertains to slide or not. So thanks so much for watching. If you guys could please like and comment on this video and subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the bell notification icon, that would help me out a lot. And until next time, take it easy.